Hey everyone, it's Lisa from Primitive Gatherings, and I am super excited to be introducing to you our second Oh Say Can You Sew Quilt-Along. Now, I like to make red, white, and blue quilts. So if you're interested in making red, white, and blue, I have this fat quarter tower here available. And this is exactly what you need for this quilt-along. And then background. Now, I'm looking at the download that you can go get on my website for $5. There's going to be 5 clues and they will each be $5. So this one here tells you your yardage requirements and the first clue. Now, it says on here that you want 7 yards of background. One needs to be 3 yards because that border fabrics, we're going to use all of that. And I recommend that this quilt is beautiful with these big 10-inch borders on. If you don't want a big quilt, you don't need that 3 yards. Then it has 4 yards of the same background fabric, and that's for piecing all the blocks together. When looking at the 7 yards, I almost want to encourage you to buy a little bit more fabric, because if you make a mistake, you're always insured to have enough fabric. And these that I'm using is a Bella solid. So 182, 200, 97, 98, any of those all work with this fabric line. And you are still going to use these light prints as well. All right, so now I want to just show you how to get going with your first clue. So now this clue is all about flying geese. You're going to make all the flying geese that you need for the whole quilt. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to make them. I'm going to show you the way I prefer first, and then if you're not quite sure, I'll show you a way you can make them, but it's much more time consuming the other method. So just try to do it the way I do it. But the first thing that you must do is starch fabrics. If you don't know how to starch fabrics, please look for my video on YouTube on how to starch cotton fabrics. All right, so let's get into the flying geese. I have 2 sets here. One set here is cut the exact size, and then this size here are oversized. So instead of cutting 1 7/8, we cut 2 inches. So it's a little bit bigger, and then you can trim. If you can't piece accurately. These 3 flying geese right here are cut the exact as the pattern states, and we are going to make them exactly how they are, and we're going to just trim off the dog ears, and that's going to be it. We're going to be good to go into the quilt. So let me just show you how easily that is done this way first. So I have this one here set. Now this one, you're going to make 2 different sets of flying geese, 3 different sets. One with a print, and that's for a reason. This print is going to show up together outside of the background fabric. So please use where it says light print background. Don't use the background in there. I mean, you could, but it's just not going to be as interesting with the prints. The prints are going to make it much more interesting. So we have one with a print, one with regular background, and one with a different size with regular background. So all I'm going to do is lay out my pieces, and I'm going to sew this triangle here to the large triangle, just like that. I'm going to take these, I'm going to lay them nice and close, perfectly matching up, making sure I don't see any blue on this side except for the little tip right there, and that should be 1/4 inch. That is the key to making these perfect. You should have 1/4 inch there to start with. So I'm just going to slip this in my machine here. Stitch one side, and then I'm going to go over to my iron. I'm going to just move this over here now that I can. And the biggest thing you have to do is make sure you're sewing a good 1/4 inch. So when you see this unit, it should have that dog ears sticking up there, a 1/4 inch there, and a 1/4 inch there. Now don't trim these right now. You're going to put this next triangle on first, line it up perfectly, and then I'm going to stitch. Now my machine has a 1/4 inch guide. I hope that you either have a 1/4 inch guide foot like I do, or you layer tape and sew against that. To me, that is the most accurate. If you're just trying to sew on a line that's on your machine, that's hard and that's very inconsistent. So this is what I found works for me. So if you're not consistent in your 1/4 inch, figure out the best way to get that. So now I'm going to stitch this side here. So I stitched 1/4 inch and that 1/4 inch land perfectly in that corner where that triangle was poking up. So now I'm going to give it another press. All right, we're going to press that. And then now is the time to trim off your dog ears. So whether you do it with a ruler or just a scissors. All right, so now you could just take your scissors and trim these off, like so. Or you can take your rotary cutter and ruler and put that on 1.5, trim off your dog ear, I already did, and then you could do it on these sides as well. I pretty much just use my scissors and trim these off. I don't get out my rotary cutter and ruler, I just do this. And this one, perfect size of 1.5 by 2.5. All right, so that's the way you can make them just as the pattern states. So the other way you're going to make them is you cut, instead of 7/8, you cut up to the next nearest whole number. So these are bigger than what they should be. So I'm going to quickly sew these. Make sure you line them up. All right, so now every time you make one of these, you have to trim it down on all 4 sides. All right, so I don't know what the measurement is on this, but I'm assuming it's going to be 2.5. So I'm going to trim there to 2.5. I use this. This is your true north. So I always use my 2.5 or the number that it's supposed to be right there. And you trim and making sure that you have the 1/4 inch there. So now I'm assuming this has to be 4.5. Yes. So now I'm just going to put it 2.25 in the center there, and I'm going to trim that dog ear off and put it on 4.5 now and trim that there. So that's what you're going to have to do to go around every flying geese if you choose to cut them a little bit bigger and trim everyone. I don't have that much time, so maybe you have more time, but I just figured I would have much more time making them the right size right away. And starching, if you don't starch, that's a game changer as well. So starch your fabrics. They're like sewing little paint chips through your machine, especially when you get to the littler ones. And remember, don't cut off these dog ears until you have the whole unit sewn, then trim off your dog ears, because it gives you places to aim for when you're stitching. All right, so that's my tips on how to make flying geese 2 different ways. And of course, there's other ways of doing it with squares on a rectangle, or a big square with 2 squares. There's lots of ways to make them. I just find that this is the easiest and most accurate way for me to do it. So good luck and keep stitching.